It was one of those evenings where everything felt ordinary. I was sitting on the couch, a half-empty mug of tea warming my hands. The soft hum of the refrigerator the only soundtrack to the quiet. My mind wandered, listing off errands, bills. Nothing urgent, nothing alarming. I remember thinking, life is finally just normal. And normal felt safe. Then my phone rang. That familiar chime cut through the calm like glass. I picked it up, expecting her casual, "Hey, what's up?" Instead, her voice carried a weight I wasn't ready for. "Did you hear? The farm, it's sold. We leave tomorrow." I froze. I blinked, stared at the ceiling like maybe the words would float away if I ignored them. Sold. The word echoed in my head, distorted and heavy, like it belonged to someone else's life, not mine. Sold? How? When? Why? I could almost feel my chest tightening, a cold squeeze that made it hard to breathe. I must be hearing this wrong. I said, my voice low, unsteady. It can't be true. Her tone was casual, almost careless, like she was talking about groceries, not the place my mother had poured her life into. And in that moment, I realized everything I thought was untouchable, the memories, the smells of fresh soil, the creak of the old wooden fence, the laughter that used to echo across the fields. Someone had taken it all without asking. I remember standing there, phone in hand, the cold steel of the doorknob pressing against my palm as I gripped it like a lifeline. The living room was empty, silent, and the walls seemed to close in, amplifying the shock in my chest. And then I saw her, my mother, in my mind. She was out there on the farm, hands deep in the rich, dark soil, sun striking her hair just right, her face alive with the satisfaction of tending to something she loved. She had always spoken about the farm as if it was more than land. It was a legacy, a story she had trusted me to carry forward. This land, it's not just for you. I hear her saying in my memory, her voice steady but kind. It carries generations. Treat it well. I sank down onto the couch, clutching the phone like it could anchor me back to some sense of reality. I stared at the blank TV screen, at the shadows in the corners of the room, and tried to make sense of it. But there was nothing to make sense of. The farm was gone. My mother's legacy, my connection to her, to my past, it was slipping through my fingers faster than I could even process. And yet, everything around me remained eerily calm. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. The evening light slanted through the blinds, unchanged, oblivious to the storm inside me that I didn't know if I wanted to scream, cry, or just vanish into the silence. I just sat there, the words sold looping in my mind, over and over, each repetition heavier than the last, and that's when I realized nothing would ever feel ordinary again. After the call, I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, staring at the empty living room, letting the silence swallow me whole. And then my mind wandered, as it always does, to the farm, my mother's farm, the place that had shaped me in ways I hadn't fully understood until it was gone. I remember the smell first. That earthy, almost sweet scent of freshly turned soil after rain, mixed with hay and wildflowers. It was the smell of summers, spent barefoot, running through the fields with no care, the wind whipping through my hair. I can almost feel it now, the warmth of the sun on my back, the sting of dirt under my fingernails. The farm wasn't just land. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat that ran parallel to mine. There were the mornings, crisp and quiet, when the roosters crow would drag me out of sleep, and I'd stumble into the kitchen where Mom had already brewed tea strong enough to wake the dead. I remember the way she'd hum as she worked, the sound blending with the clatter of pots and pans and the soft scrape of boots on the wooden floor. I'd sit at the table, my cup cradled in my hands, watching her move through the kitchen like she belonged to it, like the house and the land were extensions of her being. Afternoons were spent in the fields. I can still picture the fence we built together, each post hammered in under her careful supervision. She'd be patient with me, correcting my mistakes with a smile, and I'd think, I'll remember this forever. And I did, every bruise, every laughter-filled mishap, every sunburned shoulder. Those memories are stitched into me, invisible but impossible to ignore. And then there was the small orchard behind the farmhouse, where the apple trees bent low under their fruit. We'd pick them together, my small fingers brushing against hers, the juice sticky on my hands. She'd make pies and preserves, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the entire house. I remember the pride in her eyes, a silent message. This is yours too. One day that I realized now that every corner of that farm held a memory, a lesson, a fragment of her soul. And in the quiet of my living room, I mourned not just the land, but the moments that had made it sacred. The Sunday mornings, the laughter echoing across fields, the quiet talks while sitting on the old porch swing as the sun dipped behind. The hills.it hit me then, with a kind of physical ache, that someone had sold more than property. They had taken a piece of my history, a fragment of my identity, and I couldn't reach it anymore. It wasn't just soil and wood they had sold. A lifetime of belonging that I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me, as vivid and cruel as a dream. I could hear her voice, see her hands buried in the dirt, smell the rain-soaked earth. And in that fleeting, painful moment, I realized the depth of what was lost. Not just a farm, not just a house, but a sanctuary where I had learned who I was, who I could be, and what it meant to be loved. And yet, there was a strange comfort in remembering. Even if the farm was gone, these memories were mine, untouchable, unbreakable, impossible to sell. They were my inheritance, even more precious than the land itself, that I couldn't sit still. The more I tried to convince myself it was a mistake, the tighter the knot in my chest grew. I paced the living room, phone clutched in one hand, scrolling through emails and messages, my mind frantically searching for a loophole, a misstep, anything that could undo this nightmare. But everything was clean, neat, legal, like a perfect lie wrapped in official documents that I remember thinking, how can something so wrong feel so right on paper? There it was, a signed contract, the final sale, the transfer of ownership. My mother's farm, gone, without a whisper of warning. I ran my fingers through my hair, pressed my palms to my eyes, and tried to breathe, but the room felt smaller with each inhale, the walls pressing in like they were in on the betrayal too. My wife watched me quietly from across the room, her voice calm, almost soothing. We'll just leave tomorrow. It's not a big deal, she said. And that's when frustration exploded inside me. Not a big deal. The word sold wasn't just a fact. It was a gut punch, a scar carved into the core of my life. How could she be so detached? I could feel anger and disbelief mingling, twisting together like smoke in my chest. Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? Why am I finding out like this? Every detail seemed designed to cut deeper. The calm certainty of the sale, the quiet acceptance in her voice, the total absence of explanation. My mother's words came back to me, her gentle warnings about responsibility and trust. Always, read the fine print, she used to say, her eyes warm but serious. I had trusted people, trusted her instructions, trusted that what she built would remain ours, and now it was all gone in a flash. I was back on the farm again. I could feel the rough grain of the fence under my palms, the sun on my shoulders. My mother's laughter ringing in the air as she corrected me, patiently guiding my hands. That patience, that care, that love, it felt like it was being ripped away from me. And suddenly, the legal papers on my coffee table seemed like the coldest, cruelest betrayal, a final judgment on memories I had thought were untouchable. That I sank into the couch again, burying my face in my hands, muttering to no one. The house felt hollow, the soft hum of appliances a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside me. Every glance at the clock, every tick of time passing, reminded me that tomorrow we'd leave. And leaving wasn't just leaving the farm, it was leaving the memory of my mother alive, untouched. I knew I had to act, to investigate, to understand who could have done this. But my body refused to move, trapped somewhere between rage and grief, a twisted limbo that refused clarity. My mind was a carousel of questions, accusations, flashbacks, and regret. Asterisk. Even now, I can still feel that room pressing in, the documents staring at me accusingly, the quietness of my wife's calm demeanor. It all felt like the world was tilted off its axis. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I was powerless to change what had been done. All I could do was try to make sense of the senseless, to navigate the wreckage left in the wake of someone else's decision. That I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had deliberately taken this from me. It wasn't just the sale, it was the manner of it, the quiet erasure of everything I held dear. My hands shook as I rifled through old emails, scanned documents, and every note my mother had ever left me about the farm. And there it was, the undeniable truth. The farm hadn't just been sold. It had been sold by someone I trusted. Someone who knew how much it meant to me. A cold, sinking weight settled into my chest. How could they do this? How could they betray her memory and mine? Every detail that once felt secure, the letters, the keys, the conversations, now felt like lies, carefully orchestrated to remove me from the story entirely. I found myself back in the farmhouse in my mind, walking through the rooms, touching the counters, the weathered beams. I could feel the echoes of my mother's laughter, her voice calling me to come help in the garden, her gentle scolding when I missed a step or spilled something. She had trusted us, trusted me, to carry this legacy forward. And someone had shredded that trust into neat, legal pieces. I remember sitting on the porch swing, sun falling through the trees, feeling her hand brush mine as she said softly, "Always know who you can count on and who you can't." I'd laughed at the time, thinking I was too young to truly understand. Now, years later, those words stung like salt in an open wound. I had known, in the back of my mind, who might betray us, but I had ignored the warning. Anger bubbled up, sharp and bitter. I wanted to call, scream, demand answers, but the rational part of me knew it wouldn't help. The sale was done, irrevocable, legally airtight. The betrayal wasn't just about property. It was about the principle, the loss of control over the memory of the person I loved most. I paced the room again, my eyes darting to every corner, imagining the farm as it had been, the orchard heavy with fruit, the barn filled with hay, the quiet creek that ran behind the property. Each memory felt stolen, tainted by the realization that someone had made a choice to erase my inheritance. That I remember muttering to myself, sarcastically, "Well, thanks for teaching me a lesson about trust." It was the kind of dark humor that only surfaces in moments of helpless anger. I hated myself a little for trying to turn grief into a joke, but it was all I had. The quiet of the house was deafening. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant car outside, seemed to emphasize the enormity of the betrayal. I realized I couldn't just accept it, couldn't simply move on. There had to be answers. Someone had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. And I was going to find out who, because the farm wasn't just dirt and wood. It was my mother's heart, my history, and I wouldn't let someone else dictate what that meant without a fight. I snapped. I don't even know when it started, but the quiet rage I'd been holding inside finally spilled over. My wife was in the kitchen, calm as ever, making tea as if nothing had happened. And I was burning from the inside out. "How can you be so calm about this?" I barked, my voice echoing in the small living room. "The farm, everything, it's gone." Just like that. She looked up, startled, but not fearful. Calm, almost clinical. "It's done. There's nothing we can do. We leave tomorrow." Her words hit me like a slap. I wanted to shake her, scream until the walls themselves felt the weight of my anger. But it wasn't really her I was yelling at. It was life, fate, the universe, anyone or anything that had allowed this to happen. I was lashing out at the emptiness, at the betrayal, at the unfairness of it all. I sank to the couch, fists clenched, knuckles white, muttering under my breath. I hated myself for losing control, hated that my anger was spilling into our home, into a space that should have been safe. But I couldn't stop it. The betrayal of someone I trusted, the erasure of my mother's legacy, the casual way my wife seemed to accept it, it all collided inside me, a storm with no outlet. And then, like a knife, memories of my mother cut through the haze of rage. I could see her standing on the farm, hands buried in soil, sunlight glinting off her hair, her voice patient and firm as she guided my small hands through planting seeds. I remembered the way she had comforted me after childhood heartbreaks, her arms steady, her words soft. Patience, resilience. "You'll understand one day." That memory made me pause, a brief flicker of guilt and shame. Here I was, losing myself in anger, and she, the person who had always taught me to weather storms, was gone. I could never ask her advice, never. Hear her calm voice remind me to breathe. The rain started outside, heavy and insistent, drumming against the windows. I pressed my forehead into my hands, trying to hold back tears I didn't have the energy to hide. The sound of it was almost comforting, like the world itself understood my turmoil and cried along with me. That I glanced at my wife again. She was quiet now, wary, probably realizing I wasn't going to stop. I muttered something sarcastic, bitter, about life's fairness. It felt hollow, but it was the only outlet I had left. And then, slowly, the anger began to shift, curling inward, morphing into something heavier, sorrow. Real, gut-deep sorrow. Not just for the farm, not just for my mother, but for the part of myself that had trusted blindly, that had believed in a legacy that now felt stolen. I finally leaned back, exhaling shakily, staring at the muted living room. Shadows stretched across the walls, distorted by the dim lamplight, mirroring the twisted mess of emotions inside me. I didn't have answers yet. I didn't even know if I'd ever forgive. But for the first time since the call, I felt something else. The raw truth of my vulnerability. That I was furious, heartbroken, and utterly powerless. But at least I was feeling it. The next day arrived with a quiet inevitability, the kind of morning that feels heavier than any storm. Packing felt surreal, each item a thread pulling me further from the life I had known. I handled my mother's belongings with reverence. Her old gardening gloves, the faded apron she always wore, jars of preserves still sealed with her careful handwriting. Each object was a whisper from the past, a reminder of everything I was about to leave behind. That I walked through the farm one last time, letting my fingers brush against the familiar textures, the rough wood of the fence, the cool metal latch of the barn door, the grass bent under my feet. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and hay, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang a morning song that felt painfully out of place. Every step was a mix of nostalgia and grief, as if each blade of grass and every crooked fence post was whispering, "You're leaving me." I flashed back to that last Sunday with Mom, though at the time I hadn't known it would be the last. We had laughed while planting seeds together, the sun soft on our shoulders. She had teased me about my clumsy hands, telling me, "You'll learn, just like I did." The memory stabbed me with a sweetness that hurt more than any anger. I had taken that day for granted, never thinking it would become a memory I would cling to like a lifeline. That my wife moved quietly beside me, carrying boxes, her presence a steady contrast to the storm of thoughts inside me. We didn't speak much. Words felt inadequate, hollow against the enormity of loss. The farm was more than property. It was a repository of my history, my mother's legacy, and now it was slipping from my life like water through clenched fists. That I paused at the edge of the orchard, the apple trees heavy with fruit, their branches bowing as if in mourning. I closed my eyes, breathed in the scent of apples and soil, and let myself grieve. This wasn't just about losing land. It was about losing a place where my soul had felt anchored, a space where my identity had been nurtured. Tears burned the corners of my eyes as I traced the lines of the old porch, remembering quiet evenings with Mom, her voice soft against the hum of the crickets. I realized, in the depths of that sorrow, that the farm had been a teacher, showing me patience, resilience, and the quiet beauty of ordinary days. And now, leaving it behind, I felt like I was leaving a part of myself. But there was also acceptance, fragile and reluctant, creeping in. I knew the land would continue its life without me, just as the memories inside me would continue theirs. I could not undo the sale. I could not step back into what was lost. All I could do was honor it, carry it with me, and let it shape the next chapter of my life. I turned for the final time, my gaze lingering on the farmhouse, the barn, the orchard, imprinting the image in my mind. The wind stirred the grass at my feet, whispering through the trees, and I felt a strange mix of sorrow and reverence. Goodbye was not just leaving a place. It was leaving a part of my past, a chapter of my life written in soil and sunlight, laughter and love. And yet, even in that farewell, there was a sliver of peace. Memories cannot be sold. Memories cannot be taken. They live in me, quietly, unshakable, a testament to what truly matters. After leaving the farm, the car ride was quiet. I stared out the window, watching fields and forests blur into one another. A green and gold mosaic that reminded me painfully of everything I had lost. I could feel the weight of absence pressing down, the lingering ache of a place that had been more than land. It had been life itself. In the stillness, I began to reflect. The farm wasn't gone. Not really. Its essence, its lessons, its memory, those were still mine. I could feel my mother's presence in small, almost imperceptible ways. In the way I instinctively noticed a crooked branch, in the way I traced patterns in the soil with my fingers when I could, in the quiet routines that had become part of me. I laughed quietly to myself, a soft, bitter chuckle. So this is life, huh? Steal the land, leave the lessons. I could almost hear my mother teasing me, her gentle sarcasm like a balm on my raw nerves. Even in loss, her voice guided me, reminding me that resilience and perspective mattered more than possessions. Flashbacks came unbidden. I remembered teaching a neighbor's child to plant seeds the way my mother had taught me, her voice echoing in my mind. Patience and care, that's how life grows. The memory made my chest tighten. I realized then that the farm had never truly been about ownership. It was about nurturing, about passing values down, about creating life and tending it. Even when it was messy and imperfect, that I started thinking about all the small rituals that had defined the farm, the ones I'd once dismissed as ordinary. The morning sunlight through the orchard, the smell of the kitchen after Mom baked bread, the quiet evenings on the porch swing. Those rituals, those tiny threads, had been the real inheritance. And now, without the land, they still lived inside. Meat out of vulnerability surfaced then, raw and honest. I had mourned the physical loss of the farm, but now I could see that the greater gift had been my mother's wisdom, the patience, the resilience, the understanding that life doesn't always unfold how we plan. That lesson, etched into me, through sunburned shoulders and dirt-stained hands, was untouchable. That I whispered to myself, almost as a promise. I will carry it forward. I will honor it. I will plant seeds of my own wherever I am. And even though the ache of the loss lingered, a quiet peace began to seep in, fragile but real. Visually, I imagined it all. The sun filtering through a new window, my hands brushing over old photos and heirlooms. Tiny reminders that life's value isn't just in property, but in memory and care. The irony wasn't lost on me. The farm could be sold, but my mother's lessons? Those were priceless and indestructible. Even amid heartbreak, there was wisdom to be found, and I clung to that, letting it shape my next steps, softening the jagged edges of loss with understanding and reflection. The day we left the farm, I didn't just feel the absence of land. I felt the closing of a chapter. But as the car pulled onto the long country road, I realized that leaving didn't have to mean forgetting. Every mile between us and the farmhouse carried the weight of grief, yes, but it also carried the possibility of starting again, carrying the lessons with me. I glanced at my wife. She was quiet, focused on the road, and though our shared silence was heavy with unspoken tension, it also allowed me space to think, to breathe. I let my thoughts drift back to my mother, imagining her watching me from somewhere beyond, her face calm, her eyes full of that patient wisdom she always wore. I wanted her to see that I wasn't broken. I was learning, adapting, moving forward. The first step was acceptance. The farm had been sold, and no amount of anger, pleading, or investigation could change that. I had spent weeks, no, months, running in circles inside my own head, replaying calls, emails, conversations, searching for someone to blame. But now, a quiet clarity emerged. The farm's physical presence didn't define the lessons it had imparted. Those lessons were mine to carry wherever I went. Flashbacks surfaced again. I could see my mother's hands guiding me through planting seeds, hear her voice instructing me on patience and diligence, see her laughing softly at my mistakes. I realized that her legacy wasn't tied to fences or barns. It lived in the way I moved through the world, the choices I made, and the care I put into life itself. That I spoke to myself quietly, almost as if affirming a contract with my own heart. I will honor her memory. I will carry her wisdom forward. I will not let this loss define me. Saying it aloud gave it weight. Saying it aloud made it real. The road stretched ahead, long and winding, but with each mile, the tension in my chest eased a little. I began imagining the small rituals I could recreate. Gardening in the backyard of our new home, cooking the same preserves my mother used to make, even taking quiet moments to pause and feel the earth beneath my fingers. These were small, humble acts, but they tethered me to her, to the farm, to the life I had loved. The landscape outside blurred past, golden fields and rolling hills, a reminder that life continues to move, even when we are unprepared for its twists. And as we drove, I felt a quiet determination settling in. I couldn't go back, couldn't undo what had been done, but I could step forward, carrying every memory, every lesson, every ounce of love and care my mother had left me. Visually, I imagined the sunlight streaming through the windshield, highlighting the dust in the air, casting golden hues over the dashboard. My hands rest on the steering wheel, steady, intentional, guided not by anger, but by resolve. The past was behind me, the farm a memory etched deeply into my heart, and the future stretched ahead, uncharted but full of possibility that I wasn't running from loss anymore. I was moving through it, with acceptance, with purpose, with the quiet, unshakable knowledge that some legacies are impossible to take away. The first few weeks in our new place were strange, quiet, and disorienting. I walked through rooms that didn't carry the scent of my childhood, touched counters that didn't hold the grooves of years of labor. And yet, life was quietly persistent, insisting on going forward whether I was ready or not. I started small. A windowsill garden, tomatoes, basil, a few herbs my mother had taught me to nurture. It wasn't the farm, of course, but planting the first seeds felt like reclaiming a fragment of myself. The dirt smelled faintly sweet under my fingers. The sun cast golden light over the soil, and I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Control, not over property, but over life, over growth. Flashbacks came in bursts, soft but vivid. My mother's careful hands guiding mine. The orchard at dawn, the sound of water trickling into the trough as we watered the plants together. Each memory became a guidepost, a reminder that even though the farm was gone, its spirit was alive in me. I began carrying those moments into daily life, slowing down, noticing small things, nurturing life in ways that weren't grand but profoundly real. Cooking became another anchor. I dusted off old recipes my mother had left, her careful handwriting smudged in spots, her instructions dotted with little notes, patience, love, and a dash of salt. Preparing these meals wasn't just about food. It was about connection, memory, and honoring her legacy. I could almost hear her voice whispering encouragement as I measured ingredients, folded dough, and tasted the results. Evenings were quieter, but I used that stillness to reflect. I wrote letters I would never send, sometimes to my mother, sometimes to the person who sold the farm. They weren't angry or accusatory, just honest, pouring grief and hope onto paper. It was a way to untangle myself from the knots of loss and betrayal, to plant seeds of emotional resilience that, like the tiny garden outside, could grow over time. Slowly, I noticed the subtle shifts inside me. There was laughter again, quiet and hesitant at first, then growing. There were small victories, a tomato ripe enough to taste, a loaf of bread that didn't collapse, a sunset so beautiful it caught me off guard and reminded me that life had more to offer than what I had lost. Visually, I imagined sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. My hands, dirty from tending the garden, rest on the soil as I lean close, smiling quietly. Outside, the wind rustles the new trees I planted, small but alive. A testament to beginnings that mattered. That I realized then that hope wasn't about reclaiming what was gone. It was about creating something new that carried the spirit of what had been. I was still connected to my past, but I was learning to shape the future in my own hands. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand. Some roots can't be uprooted. The farm might be gone, but its lessons, its love, its resilience, those had taken root inside me. And wherever I was, I could nurture them, and they could flourish. Months had passed since we left the farm, but the memories never faded. They simply settled into me, quiet and steady, like a river running beneath the surface of my daily life. I no longer felt the sharp sting of betrayal or the raw ache of loss. Instead, there was a calm, reflective space where grief and love coexisted, intertwined in a way that felt natural and necessary. That I often sat by the kitchen window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden light over the small garden I'd nurtured. It wasn't the farm, but it had become something of its own. Tomatoes ripened, herbs flourished, and tiny wildflowers sprang up in unexpected corners. Each little sprout reminded me that life continues, that growth persists even after endings. Flashbacks came softly now, like gentle waves rather than storms. I could hear my mother's laughter among the orchard trees, feel her hands guiding mine as we planted seeds, taste the preserves she had lovingly made. Those memories were no longer painful. They were gifts, treasures I could carry wherever I went. That I reflected on everything the farm had taught me: patience, resilience, care, and the understanding that love and legacy aren't confined to land or objects. They live in actions, in memories, in the way we touch the world and the people around us. I felt a deep gratitude for the life my mother had shared, for the lessons she had instilled, for the love that still guided me. Even my relationship with my wife had shifted. We moved forward not in perfection, but in understanding. Silence was no longer tension-filled. It was space for thought, reflection, and mutual respect. We created small rituals that honored the past: cooking, gardening, sharing stories, tiny ways to carry the farm's spirit into our present lives. Visually, I imagine a slow pan across the room, old photographs of my mother, jars of preserves lined neatly on a shelf, sunlight catching dust motes in the air. Outside, the garden sways gently in the breeze, each plant a testament to care, patience, and life's quiet persistence. I rest my hands on the edge of the counter, eyes soft, a faint smile tracing my lips. That I realized that the farm's true legacy wasn't soil or wood. It was love, memory, and the lessons that endure through time. I could no longer walk its fields, but I could live its essence in every thoughtful action, every small act of care, every moment of presence. And in that, I found peace. Not the easy, carefree kind, but the hard-earned, bittersweet peace that comes from knowing that even after loss, life continues, beauty persists, and love remains. The farm may be gone, but my connection to it, to my mother, to the lessons she planted in me, they were indestructible. I carried them forward with gratitude, with reverence, and with the quiet, unwavering understanding that some things can never truly be taken away.